Influencer idolization. We all know what goes on, we've all probably seen it. Even the ones who do idolize influencers probably know that it happens, they probably just don't realize that they do it themselves. And I want to talk about the effects that this can have on followers because YouTubers are more influential than actual celebrities. And there's many reasons for that. One is that influencers are way easier to relate to than actual celebrities. Some people, might look up to them like older brothers or sisters, or feel like if they knew them in real life, they'd be friends. People are watching less TV these days and therefore paying less attention to like actors and actresses and spending more time online on social media. Influencers are often more engaged with their fans than celebrities are. And because of that, viewers feel like they have more of a personal connection to the YouTuber or the influencer. And so there's 6 problems that I see that are kind of related to influencer idolization that I want to talk about. So number 1 is when influencers do a ton of shady stuff over and over and over and over, and their biggest fans will still support them and defend them as if they're their lawyer and it's their job regardless of what the influencer has done. I mean, I'm sure anyone who watches like YouTube news or drama or just stuff that goes on is always in awe of when a YouTuber will do something like really shady, not like accidentally mess up or say something insensitive, not like little things, but like scam someone or do something illegal or do something just like so terrible. And of course, they'll lose a lot of followers usually, but it's just crazy that the majority of their following almost always stays and defends them. Someone with hundreds of thousands or millions of subscribers might lose like 10,000, 30,000 subscribers for doing something really bad, but at the end of the day, the majority of their following is still somehow justifying their actions time after time after time. Even the people who continuously do problematic stuff over and over to this day, somehow a large portion of their audience will still find a way to justify all of their actions. And it's kind of crazy to think that regardless of what someone does, there's always going to be people who still think they're like some grand person. I mean, they could like, kill a cat and people would still be fine with them. And I'm not advocating for cancel culture, but at the same time, it's like the influencers who are continuously doing stuff that is harmful or just kind of shows that their true character is not very good. How do they still have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers? It's just crazy to think about. And I'm not making this video because I'm like some psychologist who has all these answers. Like, I'm super curious to know how a person can idolize influencers so much. I've never really been the type of person to idolize influencers or celebrities or whatever, so I can't really relate to it. I do think that it's not just younger children who idolize influencers. I think it's common, probably, of course it's more common for kids, but I think it happens in all age ranges. Number 2, when followers don't question the actions of their idols because they think they're infallible, or they think, oh, everyone's imperfect, so it's okay for them to, promote something harmful or whatever. It's not bad to question people. In fact, it's the opposite. You shouldn't just blindly trust and follow someone just because they're motivational or inspirational or relatable, and just do whatever they do and accept whatever they say, because in a few years, they might have a totally different perspective on things. People change. Sometimes it's for the better, sometimes it's for the worse. But influencers are not always going to stay the same. And so looking up to them and adopting a certain perspective or lifestyle choice that they have just because they have it and you think that they're wise or whatever and so they must be right, isn't a good idea. There's a couple of reasons I feel like people will not question the people they look up to. First of all, they think they're perfect and can't do any wrong. Second of all, since they're imperfect, we shouldn't judge them because everyone's imperfect and everyone makes mistakes, so they should be able to get away with anything. Number 3, they do so much good that when they do something shady, it's kind of like overlooked because look, they're doing all this amazing stuff. And so I feel like even when influencers are doing pretty serious stuff, a lot of their followers will just completely overlook it because they look up to them and they think so highly of them that they don't really think critically about the influencer's actions. I think it's kind of like being in a romantic relationship where there's so many red flags, but you want to be with them so bad that you ignore them or you justify them all individually, and you never really look at them all added up together and realize like, wow, there's a lot of red flags, because you're just looking at each one on an individual basis and you're like, oh, well, you know, this kind of is bad, but it's not that bad, like I can ignore it. So just please, please, please question the people you follow. They're not infallible. Just because they're imperfect does not mean that every action they do should just be ignored or just let it slide because it's whatever. People can do serious things. People can promote harmful content on the internet, and you should question that, because if you don't, you're more likely to be susceptible to falling victim to that harmful content. Number 3 is one that drives me crazy, and it's when constructive criticism and hate are all lumped together as hate. Anything that's not praise for an influencer is considered hate by the fans and often by the influencer as well. Hashtag good vibes only, because when we're all love and positivity all the time, that means we can write off anything any influencer does, as we're all constantly changing and growing. You don't know them personally, so you can't judge them. You're just projecting. You're just being negative. They're just sharing their personal truth. They're just sharing their journey. Onision was just sharing his journey of being a predator, allegedly. J-Station was just sharing his journey of using dead celebrities for views. Shallon Lester was just sharing her journey about being racist towards people, making harmful comments about those with mental illness, and falsely accusing a YouTuber of committing a crime. Like, they're just sharing their journey. Anything that's not literally worshiping and bowing down to the influencer is hate. Anyone who disagrees with them is a hater and is jealous, or they should just mind their own business. Followers will ask why they care what the influencer does with their life, even if what they're doing is harmful. And I also feel like this has an impact on how much the influencers themselves will look at constructive criticism and hate as all one and the same. All hate. You know, the influencer thinks that everyone who doesn't agree with them is just a hater and is jealous of them and is venting or projecting, and then they can use this to victimize themselves even when they're the one in the wrong. They probably know the difference between constructive criticism and hate, but by lumping them all together in the latter, they don't have to take accountability for the actions because they can just say that everyone is being mean to them. If a creator is promoting a message to their audience that you consider to be harmful, you just disagree with, or you just want to share your opinion on, you should be allowed to share your opinion on that if it's polite. I mean, don't expect people to just lovingly accept hateful, nasty comments, but it is totally fine to speak up and be like, hey, you know, I don't really agree with what you said here. That is okay. That's how life should work. It should not be influencer says X, therefore everyone agrees with influencer saying X because influencer is God. It's so much more beneficial for people who watch videos where influencers are sharing their opinions to be able to see other people's opinions, opposing opinions. But at the same time, just because you disagree with an influencer doesn't mean that you're automatically right, and if the influencer was a good person, then they'd agree with you. An influencer disagreeing with your disagreement does not make them closed-minded or a bad person. You know, people should be able to have back and forth conversations. And I think that's really something that's great about social media, is the amount of conversations that we're able to have. Even though, you know, YouTube comments isn't really the most productive way to have a conversation, I think it's so much better for people to be able to share their opinions back and forth and talk about certain topics rather than just accepting one point of view and then we're done. Number 4. What you see is not reality, even for those who care about being genuine and authentic. I get that a lot of people know this and think that it's obvious and everyone knows it, but I just think it's important to still talk about, because I feel like people don't know it on the level that somebody like me who posts content on social media knows it. And so, like, from my experience, authenticity is really important to me. I try to be as authentic and genuine as possible, but at the same time, when I was sharing vlogs and my travels, even though I was trying to be authentic and felt like I was sharing everything and not just sharing the good, people still had completely flawed versions of myself or my life in their heads. And now I don't post vlogs anymore, but people still, I feel like, have often a false version of me, or just one that doesn't really line up with my perception of myself. And there's a lot of people who make assumptions about me, not in like a hateful, negative way, just assuming that they kind of know who I am or what I like or whatever. And oftentimes they're wrong. And I'll try to explain that to them, and they'll like argue with me about it and act like they know me better than I do. That doesn't happen that much, but trust me, it's happened before. You have to realize that, of course, there are people who put on like this whole fake show for YouTube, but of course there's a lot of people who are genuine and who are real. But even with them, you're not getting the full picture of their life or their personality or anything. And you should also know that people are totally entitled to their privacy. I don't share every aspect of my life or my personality in here. There's things that I would never want to share or talk about, and that's the same for probably everybody. It's also important to realize that it's often hard to share certain things on social media, especially like your faults, the things that you're not good at. That's hard to share when you have a lot of people watching you, and a lot of people, want to be role models. They want to come onto their YouTube channels or their Instagrams and be able to share something that's going to help people. And so when somebody who shares about positivity, for example, is feeling down and negative and kind of in a rut for a while, they might not want to share about that until they're out of it, and they can kind of pair it with an uplifting message. And people who talk about like health and fitness inspiration type stuff, they're not going to want to share when they're in a slump or not really doing well in their health or fitness journey, because they, again, want to be the ones to kind of help people and share inspirational content. And so they're likely not going to talk about their slump until they're out of it, so they can pair it with something that's going to help people. And it's totally okay for an influencer to not want to share hard times that they're going through, but you should just be aware that it's possible that anyone that you follow, that you envy, you look up to, you feel like, wow, I wish that I had their life. You don't really know exactly what they're going through, because they might not want to or feel comfortable or ready to talk about certain things. Number 5, which I already kind of touched on a little bit, is don't do something just because an influencer does it. Like, don't buy a product just because an influencer uses it, because they might not be using it in a couple of years. Or don't follow some ideology that they have just because they have it. Do your own research, look it up, find other people who are doing it, find other perspectives on it, find people who are against that ideology or whatever the thing is, Make sure you're really looking into things and considering things before you're doing something that you see an influencer promote, especially if they're being paid, if it's a sponsorship. You don't really know. I mean, you can guess who is authentic and who really cares about the sponsorships that they do, but you don't really know if they're telling the whole story of the product or the service. But still, for those who aren't paid to talk about things, they will change their views on some of the things they talk about in a couple months or years. It's just bound to happen. Everyone's changing. That's completely normal. And especially when it comes to people who are in their teens and 20s, we have such little life experience, and while we can still, of course, offer valuable advice, we're just constantly changing and we're learning as we go, just like everyone else. And lastly, number 6, when followers sound or act exactly like the influencer who they look up to. And I see this a lot on Instagram or sometimes on YouTube, but it's mostly like in comment sections, An influencer will have a really specific way of talking or of writing, like a certain writing style, or they'll use certain emojis on a regular basis that aren't just like the very typical ones that everyone kind of uses. And not for everyone, but for a lot of people, you'll see that, of course, most people who follow a certain influencer are going to have similar interests and therefore are going to sound slightly like them. But I've seen many times where followers will sound literally like indistinguishable from the influencer that they're commenting on their page or their channel of. They literally will sound like exact replicas of clones of the influencer. And I think this is so much more common than people realize, of course, on a smaller scale for a lot of people. And I definitely know that I have done this before. There's definitely people who I used to look up to, and like in my Instagram captions, I definitely try to like emulate the people who I looked up to at the time. And so it's like people see this person as so wise or knowledgeable or inspirational or poetic or whatever, having a good aesthetic. It doesn't just have to do with writing, you know. A lot of people copy other people's aesthetic, and it's great to take inspiration. Like, totally great to take inspiration from all the things that I'm talking about. But when you see somebody just like completely cloning another person's writing or aesthetic, it's likely that the person looks up to them so much that they want to be like them. They envy them, and they kind of just slowly, gradually start to act more like them. This is something that obviously doesn't just happen on social media. We do this with the people that we spend the most time around, you know, family members, friends. So it's something that probably affects all of us on like a small scale, but I'm talking about the big scale when it's like, whoa, like it's really, really worrisome how much every comment that you go through is like people just writing in the same way, or saying the same like relatable stuff, or trying to take the same types of Instagram pictures or post the same types of YouTube videos. It happens a lot, and I think it's just really good to be aware of the people who you follow and think about like, am I taking inspiration for them in a healthy way, or am I trying to basically be them as much as possible? So overall, I just really want people to be as conscious as possible about the content they're consuming and what types of people they're following and who they're looking up to and how much they're looking up to them. And if you have anything to add on to these 6 points, then I would love to hear them. Comment that below. And yeah, that's all I have to say.